we also have those good developers actually with really good practices who engage locals from the outset and really get their opinions, get their feedback and integrate it into the design of the project. And really the results are really magic. And we see it already in the shorter permitting times, and the locals are not only maybe accepting it, but they are really embracing it.
If the first time locals hear about your solar or wind project is when the diggers show up, you've already lost. I've seen it too many times. A public hearing no one attends. A website no one finds. A glossy brochure no one reads. And yet, we're shocked when opposition grows, when projects get delayed, or worse, scrapped entirely. So today, we're not talking about technology. We're talking about trust. And my guest knows a thing or two about that. I'm joined by Seda Orhan, Renewable Energy Program Manager at CAN Europe and board member at the Renewable Grids Initiative, to talk about a report that really struck a chord with me, and hopefully with you too. It's called Community Engagement and Fair Benefit Sharing of Renewable Energy Projects. It's a refreshingly practical report, not just more talk about just transition, but 14+1 clear and measurable KPIs to track if a project is doing community engagement well or is just ticking boxes. Because here's the truth: no fair benefit sharing, no social license. It's that simple. So let's get into it. Seda, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's really nice. I'm one of the big fans of your podcast, of your show. So it's really nice to have this really important conversation, Marine.
Thank you so much, Seda. So, Seda, before we dive into the findings of this report, what drew you into this space? You said you have been living in Brussels for 20 years now.
Well, yes, I'm originally from Turkey, born and grew up in Turkey, and I studied human rights development studies. I was very interested in sustainable development. I mean, during the 90s, it also reveals a bit my age. Huh? So, yeah, I mean, I started my journey in Brussels with an internship at the European Parliament, and I was really fascinated by the democratic institutions, how the European laws are being made. And I worked for several European environmental networks and in different fields, from environmental protection, biodiversity, and all really the issues covering the sustainability part. And for the last 6 years, I'm with Climate Action Network Europe. So we are the leading NGO coalition fighting the climate crisis. And it's really great because we really unite over 200 member organizations in 40 countries. So there is a vast amount of experience, knowledge, and together we are really pushing for a fast and fair energy transition towards a fully renewable and efficient energy system. So as you were also saying, this transition really needs to happen, and it's really not about technology nor costs, but it's really about people, right, Marine? It's really about building the trust. And how do we build trust? So this was really the departure for our report and for our really rolling up the sleeves and saying, yes, what we need is now dramatically scaling and speeding up the renewables and infrastructure deployment. Yes, it needs to be affordable. We are building a resilient and affordable energy system. But how are we doing with the justness, with the fairness? Are we having the local communities on board? And across Europe, you also, rightly pointed out at the beginning, it's often the projects come as a slap on people's face for the local residents. And how do we really avoid it? How do we genuinely involve local communities? How do we share the benefits? So, yeah, I mean, overall, actually, there is overwhelming support for renewable energy. If you read the results of the polls, over 80%, even 90% of the European citizens actually support renewable energy. But when it really comes to the actual projects on the ground, we lose this support. So how do we keep that support? How do we keep this momentum? So this was really our departure point. And myself, I'm passionate about the energy transition and especially renewables, all the innovation and all the opportunities actually it can deliver, and it's already delivering for people.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and that's completely echoes some conversation we've been having on the show. I mean, one of your colleague, Monica Vidal, she was recently one of our guests. She talked about the Build Better Lives initiative, but we also had this really insightful conversation with Rune Kurt, who's like making sure people visualize and trust the project. How it will look before accepting it is really built on social acceptance, because as you said, it's not about, I mean, people really have to embrace it. Otherwise we all face this kind of NIMBY initiative. And if there are already so many bottlenecks, it's really a shame if people are part of the bottlenecks and not part of actually building a solution that fits their needs, right? Because it's about today and tomorrow's needs, and it makes it really easier and cheaper overall in the long run. So that's really why it matters. But let's make a step back. So mentioned it in introduction, and you mentioned a few things already, but why do the way we engage community matters so much now? What are like the kind of tipping points that already exist?
Yeah, it really matters because we have our renewable energy targets for the countries, for the European Union overall, but also beyond going beyond the targets for 2030, we actually need to ditch the fossil fuels, reduce the energy consumption, and really scale up those renewables deployment, towards climate neutrality. So this is really important that it will only happen if we really get the communities on board. And it's really building a different energy system, than the past, the dinosaur energy system that was really based on the fossil fuels, central fossil fuel infrastructure. By dinosaurs and with dinosaurs. So we're really building here a different decentralized energy system. And it's really providing us a great opportunity to do things right. And we know that, to achieve the speed that we need, or not only for targets, not only to fight the climate crisis, but to build this affordable and resilient energy system, we know that it can be only fully renewable. And how do we build this system? So we need to get those people, we need to involve them, because often local communities are the ones who know their environment, who know the landscape. Right. And we know that those projects, so it's not also all doom and gloom. We also have those good developers actually with really good practices who engage locals from the outset and really get their opinions, get their feedback and integrate it into the design of the project. And really the results are really magic. And we see it already in the shorter permitting times, and the locals are not only maybe accepting it, but they are really embracing it. Of course, it's also about the energy communities, how much ownership, how much engagement actually it's being offered to local communities as well.
Yeah, I mean, you said that when the developers decide to go for it, to go for involving the people, it's creating some magic. I really like that, because you say that first it has to be a proactive discussion, but then since there is so much support, underlying support, it's just that it's so hidden because of like the kind of news that we see everywhere. Negativity tends to prevail, in what we hear about, etc. But when there is this kind of meaningful steps that are taken, there is something really, really interesting and good can happen. So that's really nice. But if we look at the kind of mistakes that are taken that don't lead to this kind of magic, can you perhaps list them, the kind of mistakes that developers should avoid doing?
So in our report, it was also a result of a research looking at actually the different rules governing the community engagement and benefit sharing. But at the same time, we also looked into real life cases. So in 5 countries, in Italy, Poland, Spain, France, and found these practices, and all these bad practices actually share the common pattern. So it already starts with the bad project location. We see more and more projects going to those locations which actually have immense impact on the biodiversity. So
Ouch.
those projects who really ignore the impacts on the biodiversity located in not really suitable areas.
Mhm.
So those projects also who just inform the residents with a little leaflet in the postbox saying that, hey, we will be starting the construction next week. Or there is a public consultation happening, but nobody is really informed. So these are really the common characteristics that are shared by those best practices. So it's really when people are not consulted, they are not informed, there is no transparency about the scale of the project, how it will be deployed, what will be the impact on the local environment, on the biodiversity, and how these impacts are mitigated, what kind of measures that the developer is already taking, and is why the project site is chosen. So these are all the information actually the local communities are demanding, and also how much profit is being generated right by the project, and how much local value is created for the community, how many local jobs. So when actually local communities do not receive this information, and we also found out many cases actually the projects start badly. So not in the most suitable location and not with the most suitable design. Sometimes the height of the wind turbines are not maybe too high or too many. So when developers actually consult the local communities and the local stakeholders, for instance, the conservation NGOs or environmental groups, they can actually get really good feedback. And there are many projects where actually developers are getting this feedback and adjusting the design of the project, and where actually the location, the site of the project as well. And the result is beneficial both for the developer but also for the communities. And so this is really about how much, to what extent that the developers are integrating the concerns of the communities. And when these do not happen, and when it's really coming from like an external investor coming to the community, top-down approach, no consultation is happening, there is no community engagement plan. So these areas are not only, they are not empty areas. There is the whole cultural and historical heritage, and this should be all taken into account. But as said, there are many bad practices, but it's good that it's not all doom and gloom, and we have like a mushrooming good practices as well.
That's great. And I mean, it feels very much that, community engagement from the very beginning saves the developer time and money, right? So it should be kind of a no-brainer, but it isn't. So you have developed some KPIs, so 14 plus 1. Why not 15?
We could have it also 20 or 30, but we wanted to be also practical and concise. Okay. So the 1 plus is actually the tax contribution, because, this is not always depending on the developer's will, because it should be also enabled by the national or regional tax system. So this is why we actually put it as a kind of a +1 KPI, and all the rest actually 14 indicators, because KPI sounds really techy maybe, So the 14, let's say like a criteria, the good criteria, or let's call it a checklist, they are really checklists for the developer. So this is really a way of measuring fairness, because we know, at the principle and the narrative level, I think we all agree that the project should be fair for communities. But we started this project because our main question was, how do we measure this fairness? So how can we put concrete criteria and some metrics that we can come up with something really concrete, actionable, and also measurable? So we hope that these 14 plus 1 criteria, they're also a departure point, right? This is not like a set in stone, so it should be tailored according to the local context, further developed, but we really see it really provides a good baseline for measuring the fairness and giving a concrete guideline, a concrete pathway, actually, how to make the projects, delivering the best outcomes for the communities that are hosting them.
And what are your favorite metrics then? Among them?
Okay, I shouldn't be. I have actually many metrics, many favorite metrics, but my favorite one is the co-ownership, local ownership. This is something really emerging in some places in Europe, and I believe this can really has a transformative power for the utility-led projects.
Yeah,
This means
that's
actually like a community is having a share of the project and also having a say in the governing of the project. And I really believe in its transformative power.
yeah, where it happens, it's usually very transformative, like the kind of benefit that the community receives for their local development, for their schools, for the hospitals, for instance. It's really interesting. And there are examples from all around the world. A few months ago, I was talking to experts in Africa about this kind of benefit sharing. It was really, really super inspiring to see that it's really not a European thing. It's really not something for the wealthy white upper middle class, but it has really good impact at many different levels. But in many contexts, in the country I live in, for instance, in Italy, it's not that widespread. For instance, community energy that you mentioned that come from those directives, they are still being perceived as something very technical to start with. And then there is the part on benefit sharing and social benefits and so on. But at the core, there is this kind of, okay, let's make the tech happen and people invest in a certain model. But it's not because you invest your money that you invest your intelligence, that you invest at an emotional level, right?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, it's really sad to see also, like they call it, like with the legal term transposition, basically all the rules governing, enabling the energy communities in member states, they are not really adequately put into national law. Okay. So energy communities, they are still facing bureaucratic hurdles and they don't really have this enabling regulatory framework. So yeah, and once actually you put together the money and you have your project, and then you also face different hurdles, like a grid access is a growing issue for energy communities. So there is really a lot to do there. And yeah, with our work, we also looked into actually different benefit sharing schemes. So what could be still fair for communities, going beyond the energy communities, because we know energy communities is the most democratic form of community engagement and also garnering public support and the public engagement in the energy transition. I mean, there is no doubt around it. But what happens actually to those projects that are company-owned, developer-led, and how can we also transform these projects as well? So yeah, I mean, as said, this is, all these criteria and metrics. Of course, these are targeted for the developers, but we also see it a checklist also for host communities and municipalities. So they can actually take this checklist and then start negotiating with the developer, right? They can say, okay, this is what we want. But in most of the cases, Maureen, what we also saw in countries where these are governed by concrete rules and the responsibilities that are clarified, it also makes easier both for the developers and for the communities to really have these community benefit sharing schemes. And you mentioned Italy, because Italy was also one of the countries that we had a country deep dive. So we looked into the rules, how the actually community engagement is governed by the rule, what kind of laws are existing, but also community benefit sharing. So in Italy, for instance, the community engagement is mainly is limited to the public participation in the, obliged by the environmental impact assessments. And in many cases, developers do not really go beyond the minimum legal requirements when it comes to public consultations. And there are no community benefit sharing schemes governed by nationally or regionally. But in countries like in Germany, where you have these kind of rules, for instance, offering some tax payments to municipalities, or different rules on the community funds, then you really see it also enables those communities to demand and also for developers to offer this type of schemes. So this also actually brought us the conclusion is that, there are many inconsistencies and differences across Europe. So this is why we also call for a much stronger European legal framework governing this. Because at the EU level, for energy communities, we have the directives, we have the clean energy package actually already introducing these laws, but when it comes to the majority of the projects, we don't really have any standards, any rules, and we desperately need them, because the clean energy infrastructure is going to speed and scale up. It will be really important to ensure this consistency and the level playing field for all communities, in every country.
Yeah, and that's exactly also what I've been noticing, like working in different countries, noticing the different situation. I'm like, the directive is great theoretically, but since, there is all this transposition mechanism, that creates a very scattered landscape and practices, and we kind of need better standards in a way. And yeah, it's also something that you clearly flag in the report, that there are some brilliant examples we can draw some lessons from, but we need to like move them from nice stories or like nice to have to mainstream, right? And actual policy. So why do you think those good practice are not that mainstream yet? Is it because of laziness from policymakers or lack of willingness from the developers to go beyond what would make sense, as we said, also economically speaking, right? Or what are the roadblocks?
Yeah. So it really, as you say, Marine, it really depends on currently the will of the developers. And in countries also, for instance, in the UK, and also in some regions in Germany, for instance, and in Denmark, you have these guidelines for developers, national guidelines from the policymakers saying actually how the communities should be engaged and what kind of benefit sharing forms and schemes should be offered to the communities or municipalities. So in places where we have such guidelines and such rules, we also see better practices when it comes to projects. But the real question is, it cannot be only left to the will of the developer, because those bigger developers, they have their staff, they have their community engagement plans, but actually how do we make sure that every developer, regardless of their size and their investment size, actually offer the same standards for each community where they're deploying the project? You also talk about beyond Europe, but absolutely it's not only about in the EU, but also those projects that are happening in other continents, in other geographies as well. So yeah, for me, the bottom line is really to have some minimum standards, some minimum rules at the national, starting with the EU level, the national and regional level, and also, to enable municipalities to become better mediators, to give them tools, and to also already equip them with already those rules, so that it helps their agency as well. And secondly, it's really important working with the developers, with industry associations as well, and to really share those good practices, because there are many good practices and they don't really get enough light in the current discussions. Yeah, it will be really good to share those good practices as well, and share their own lessons learned with their peers. It would be really great. Actually, this is also a call to action. If any listeners from the developers or industry associations, also national at the EU level, it would be really great that we start sharing those principles.
I wanted to ask you about maybe if you have a couple of those good practices that you would like to share, and why for you they are the most telling in a way.
Oh, definitely. So the developers are actually, maybe the industry is used from the NGOs come up always with bad practices, actually showing how bad things are. But actually, we also have many, many good practices. And you can see in our report as well, we identified many good practices. And these are, of course, there are practices where municipality is a shareholder, but also there are practices like from a purely utility-led wind project, for instance, one in Italy as well, Rivoli Veronese wind farm. This is also, they involved thousands of local residents in the public participation process. This really amounts to 80% of the residents, and also 20% from the neighboring municipalities. They really integrated their concerns in the project design. So there are really good practices, and I really invite everyone to check it out. We also have two bad practices as well, but these are really like a scandalously bad practices. So
okay, you've teased me too much. Why is that practice you mentioned so bad?
I mean, the best practice, we have one from Spain, Aragon. I mean, the best practice, it already starts. It's a project developer, Copenhagen Infrastructure, if I'm not mistaken. And actually, they start the project in a Natura 2000, basically nature protected area, and without really consulting any stakeholders. And you can imagine, I mean, the project got stuck. There was such a big public backlash, and also environmental NGOs. It's a litigation. Yeah.
How come they got a permit in the first place, right?
So this is really about the permitting issue, right, Marine? I mean, when it comes to permitting, so much attention it should be rightly going to the bureaucratic hurdles, administrative hurdles, and we talk a lot about digitalization. No, actually mainstreaming different administrative stages. But what is really missing is that, actually people's engagement element. Yeah. And this is not taking enough spotlight in the whole permitting discussion. And this is also what we would like to bring back in the discussion. So what about community engagement and the benefit sharing? Because we know that, for projects, when they meaningfully do their job, and I mean, they get the permitting processes get easier. There is no litigation. And also, I mean, it also contributes to the overall positive sentiment towards renewables. Because we also really worryingly observing the growing anti-renewables narrative across Europe. This is really worrying because, I mean, we need to speed and scale up. This we cannot negotiate. And this is really slowing down the renewables deployment. Yeah. So, and we know what can be done better. So we know what those common characteristics that bad projects share, from no consultation, not properly made, to no benefit sharing or not proportionate or adequate benefit sharing for the communities. For instance, like €1 million project is just building a playground for kids. Is it fair? Is it proportionate, appropriate? Not really. So these are all the things I think we can really learn. And
Yeah, I would like to go to, since you're starting to mention benefit sharing, what you actually mean by benefit sharing. You mentioned maybe a kids' park, a playground is not enough. I would say that in certain areas, it's already quite an important starting point. But if they have to destroy a forest and put only one playground, that's clearly some form of social washing, right? And that's exactly what we don't want. So on the other hand, what do you mean by benefit sharing, and what good benefit sharing look like?
Yeah, it can be really in different forms, because we also don't want to dictate one form of benefit sharing. Definitely, I mean, if you read our recommendations, so there are really different types. And the first point, really the starting point, is consulting the local community, what they really need. So designing those benefit sharing schemes together with the community, where the investments should be going, and also in a close cooperation with the municipalities as well.
Do you have some examples?
Yeah, I mean, in the report, we have so many examples. For instance, there is a project in Spain, in Andalusia, and the developer worked closely with the municipality, and they offer tax reductions. And they offer electricity discounts. So these are really tangible benefits, like designed with the municipality. And we also have examples of construction of schools, kindergartens, but these are not really developers thinking what is best for the community, but really together with the municipality. For instance, in Poland, in Potegowa wind farm as well, together with the municipality, local stakeholders actually deciding what the community needs. So co-creating this process and investing in kindergarten, schools. Yeah.
And I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And that can be also a cycle lane, for instance, or something like that, right?
Absolutely. Or it can be also in a form of a co-ownership. Like a developer actually offering a share of ownership to the municipality and opening it to the local residents. This is also a very powerful form of community benefit sharing. But I mean, there is no one fit approach to all, definitely. But there is a plethora of good practices that we can really learn and scale up.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting because that is a little bit, say, corporate social responsibility and beyond. It's not a ticking box, but really making sure that the project becomes part of the, let's say, local DNA. And people also take pride in this project, maybe because they will have been working on this project, because maybe it has been financing something that is useful for the community as well. So that's not only about the kind of, yeah, okay, it's providing clean electricity. Okay, once it's there, fine. But it's also about like the kind of, yeah, we are part of a broader movement, and there are some companies that have some really positive, that are in a positive mindset somehow. That are in a way doing some kind of positive development, capitalism for good. You can name it the way you want, but something a little bit like
Yes,
that,
I
right?
mean, one project by Acciona is also one of the big developers as well. One of their projects in Spain, in a rural area, it actually helps against the depopulation of the area.
Oh
So
yeah.
they really bring the jobs back, and they also offer, for instance, taxi services for elderly. So this is something we don't really hear so often, no? Taxi services for elderly. I mean, these are all happen because the developer is actually asking the locals, what do you need?
Yeah.
And then they come with the services, but exactly the capitalism. Working for local people.
Yeah, well, that's a win-win really for everyone. And I think we live in a capitalist world, and that's a conversation we need to have in any case, like, because the people who work in this kind of capitalist organization, they are still people. So we also need to have conversations with them, right? How do they want to be impactful? I guess it's the millennial me who's speaking, but it's really about like having this kind of like a career that makes a lot of sense. So that would be really interesting to have some kind of a follow-up of this report, understanding the motivation of the people who have been working on this project, the kind of like what they got out of it, because they have become part of the community in a way, but maybe they were being seen as perhaps the bad guys, but they become the good guys. I don't know. It's maybe a little over optimistic for me, but that sounds
absolutely, because I've been talking to some people who are like working in the community engagement for these big companies, and I mean, you see also the pride in their work, and they really believe, so they really dedicate, and they're so committed. So it's really great to see, actually. I mean, capitalist companies, but you also have like a good-hearted people and winning the hearts and minds of people in the local communities.
Yeah. No, that's interesting, and I'm certain that again we hear so many bad stories. We need to be way more vocal about the good ones and about the good people as well. And it's also by kind of showing up that we make a difference. And as you said, I mean, 80 or 90% of the EU population supports renewables. I read recently that 90%, like 89% of the world's population, 89% of the world's population wanted their government to act on climate change and do more. I'm pretty certain that the remaining 11% hasn't understood the question. And I mean, if NIMBY and negativity always takes the spotlight, at the end of the day, we don't go anywhere, right? So that's good to hear this kind of very positive stories. But we are reaching the end of our recording, and Seda, I really wanted to ask you about the kind of, if you could like share some key tips to make project maybe not stand out, but because maybe that's over ambitious with only a few handful of them, but really something that would really help to make community engagement fair and benefit sharing like so mainstream and so positive, that we move from NIMBY, not in my backyard, to YIMBY, yes, in my backyard. What would that be? If we could go YIMBY.
To go YIMBY, actually the answer is really in this 14 plus KPIs. I can also go back to the KPIs, but it's really about genuinely engaging the communities. hearing them and listening and integrating their concerns, because we simply cannot afford that those valid concerns are also abused, and fueled by fossil fuel, nuclear lobbies, and those who really don't want the renewables to scale up.
Yeah.
So it's really genuinely involving communities, engaging them, and proportionally sharing the benefits and creating this value at the local level. And the good news, we have the formula to be adopted. It's like a cake recipe, as I say. So you can take the recipe and you can add or remove some ingredients, to make a delicious cake in the end. Yeah.
Oh.
A delicious, fair, fast and fair cake.
And you're from Turkey. I love Turkey. I've been there many times and I love the food, but I'm surprised how, it's like this different combination of food than from Italy or Greece. And at the end of the day, it's exactly the same combination of food, but the result is different. So it's really but it's excellent. So it's, you really need to sometimes make a step back and take ownership of those ingredients. And thank you really for flagging them, because it's so often that we hear local organization or city officials say, yeah, we would love to engage with the local community, but we don't know how. They don't trust us. It's too complicated. So let's not do it, right? So if you give the recipe to do that, that makes everyone's life so much easier.
Absolutely. Maybe I should also mention before we finish this Fast and Fair Renewables and Grids initiative. So this is not actually only us NGOs want it. So we have this initiative. It's facilitated by ICLE. It's the Local Governments Association. So they brought actually different sector representatives from civil society, wind industry, solar industry, and the cooperative sector. So together we co-created principles. So we really discuss over months what fairness could look like. So we agreed on some baseline principles. It really touches on the transparency, communication, local value creation, nature positivity. So for the listeners, please check that out as well, because this really offers a kind of a baseline framework involving also the nature side as well, that how to minimize impacts on the biodiversity and maximize benefits. Yeah. So this is already also something, and we are really glad to see this willingness from the wind and solar industry as well to really improve the practices. And also there we're also collecting some good practices as well, and also we can maybe have a next session with those developers, who are holding those good practices.
Absolutely. No, that's really interesting, because we know that grids are the backbone of the energy system. A few weeks ago, there was this big blackout in Spain, and of course, there was some blaming on renewables, which is, spoiler alert, completely untrue. So it's this kind of maybe the only infrastructure we see. We need to invest a lot in them to make space for all the renewables energy. But there is the kind of how they are funded. So it's really an important conversation that you are leading, but it's under development, right? This Renewable Grids Initiative. So listeners, they can tune in if they have some things they would like to share with you, right?
Oh, definitely. So there is already a website. It's called Fast and Fair Renewables and Grids Initiative. So we have the endorsed principles. We already have some good practice cases as well. So we also contributed as NGOs with our good cases that we found, and you can also find the good cases provided by the industry as well. So we will continue our activities, and stay tuned. And for the grids, Marie, you should have a dedicated episode.
I would love that. It's such an interesting topic. I really am really interested in grids, and I think I've mentioned it several times in the podcast. So if you're working on grids, please send me a message.
We do, At CAN we work on also grids infrastructure electrification. So happy also to contribute on these points as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Seda, for such an interesting, insightful, and full of practical tips conversation. So thank you, and see you next time.
Thank you for having me. Thanks a lot.